The training ground whistle split the Nevada morning in half. Among the rows of rigid recruits, a woman stepped through the gate, faded tee, shirt, frayed backpack, and dust-caked shoes. The entire yard froze. "Who's she?" someone muttered. Another snickered. Kitchen staff lost her way. Emily Carter didn't respond. Her eyes swept across the lines of young, cocky faces gleaming with sun and arrogance. The sunlight glinted off their badges like blades, but her gray eyes stayed calm, so calm it unsettled them. Captain Logan Pierce, towering and thunder-voiced, strode toward her. "Carter, right? You think this is a joke? This is Special Forces training, not a community workshop." His voice thundered across the camp. Emily replied evenly, "I'm here to train, sir." Laughter erupted. Ryan Keller, the loudmouth of the group, sneered, "Train? You mean to cook for us?" The men roared. Emily simply crouched to tie her shoe, ignoring them. The first drill began under a merciless sun. The recruits groaned under their packs, while Logan barked, "50 more push! Oops!" Sweat poured, tempers flared, and bodies broke rhythm. But Emily's breathing stayed steady. Sweat traced her neck. Her shirt clung to her back, yet her pace never faltered. Ryan tried to keep up, panting, refusing to be outrun by a woman. "Move it, rookie!" he growled, then shoved her shoulder. Emily hit the ground, face in the sand. The squad howled. She stood, brushed herself off, and met his eyes, icy, unshaken. "Keep going," she said softly, and ran. No anger, no complaint. That night in the mess hall, the whispers continued. Ryan slammed his tray down beside her. "So, Carter, you ever clean warehouses before this?" Laughter rippled. He flicked mashed potatoes onto her sleeve. Emily wiped it silently. From across the room, Logan watched. Something about her composure made his brow furrow. In 2 decades of command, he'd seen rebellion, fear, arrogance, but never that kind of silence. When lights dimmed, Emily sat on her bunk, untying her worn boots. Her heels were raw, bleeding. She exhaled quietly, opening a wrinkled scrap of paper in her palm. Faint handwriting. "Keep your promise, even if they never understand." Outside, laughter echoed through the barracks. Inside, her heartbeat was the only sound. Slow, deliberate, unbroken. She knew what they thought of her. She knew tomorrow would be worse. But she also knew something they didn't. Silence can roar louder than any voice. And when dawn returned to the desert, none of them could imagine that the same woman they mocked would one day make the entire camp fall silent, heads bowed, breath held, as they finally learned who Emily Carter truly was. Monday morning at the training camp began with a sharp whistle and the thick scent of hot dust in the air. Recruits gathered in formation under the blazing sun, uniforms soaked with sweat, eyes stinging from the glare. Emily Carter stood in the last row, her shoulders straight, her gaze unflinching. "Carter!" Captain Logan Pierce's voice hit like a hammer. "Do you think this is a stroll?" "No, sir." "Then prove it. Down. 100 push. Ups. Now." She dropped to the ground, her palms pressing against the burning sand. From the next row, Ryan Keller smirked. "Hey, Carter, want me to count for you?" "I'm afraid you won't make it past 10. Laughter rippled through the ranks. Tara Monroe, the blonde recruit, with a voice sharp as a blade, added, "She probably thinks this is a free yoga class." Emily said nothing. Each time she lowered herself, her shoulders trembled slightly, her face reddened, but her eyes stayed locked and steady. 97, 98, 99, 100. She stood, silent, not gasping, not faltering, just a brief nod. "Completed, sir." Captain Pierce hesitated, not out of admiration but disbelief. Few recruits could finish that number on the second day. Still, his tone stayed cold, Good. Let's see how long you last. Lunch in the mess hall was loud, with clattering trays and careless laughter. Emily chose an empty table by the wall, eating quietly like a shadow. Ryan and his friends dragged their chairs across from her, their laughter echoing across the room. "Hey, Carter!" Ryan called. "Why sit so far away? Afraid we'll smell your sweat?" Laughter erupted again. Tara pinched her nose in mock disgust. "Oh, God, maybe she's right." Emily didn't look up. She ate slowly, calmly. The more composed she was, the more it bothered them. Ryan's irritation grew. He scooped a spoonful of mashed potatoes and flung it onto her tray. Oops, slipped. The group burst into hysterics. Emily picked up a napkin, wiped the mess, and went on eating. No anger, no reaction. Somehow, her calm felt heavier than any outburst. It made them uneasy. Tara sneered. Ryan frowned. They wanted her to snap, to cry, to show weakness, but she didn't give them that satisfaction. From across the room, Captain Pierce glanced up from his meal with the other officers. His eyes lingered on her for a few seconds. Something about her composure tugged at a memory. An old soldier once trained under the Ghost Viper unit. Quiet, disciplined, dangerous enough that no one dared cross him. He shook his head. Impossible. She's just a recruit. That afternoon, the mud course began. The squad had to crawl through freezing trenches under rows of barbed wire. Tara, Ryan, and a few others deliberately slowed the line, forcing Emily to fall behind. A hard shove from Tara sent her face first into the mud, drenching her completely. "Come on, Carter," Ryan yelled, laughing. "Try not to drown in there." Emily said nothing, crawling forward, mud coating her face, her hands bleeding. When she finally pulled herself out of the last pit, Tara and her friends were already standing nearby, spotless, arms crossed, smirking. "You look stunning," Tara mocked. "If this were a beauty contest, you'd win the prize for battlefield disaster." Emily stood, wiped the mud from her face, and met Tara's eyes for just a moment. That look, cold, bottomless, made Tara's voice catch in her throat. "Don't look at me like that!" she snapped, but her tone trembled. Emily turned away, silent. That night, while the others joked and chatted in the barracks, Emily sat alone, stitching her torn boots with coarse thread. From her bag, she pulled out an old photograph of a man in a black uniform, his face half hidden by the light. She set it beside her and stared for a long while. Outside, Tara's voice rang out, "She'll quit tomorrow. You'll see." Ryan laughed. "Yeah, or get kicked out before she even learns how to tie her shoes." More laughter followed. Emily folded the photo, slipped it into her pocket, and whispered into the darkness, "You can laugh all you want, but I know why I'm here." She closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. The desert wind howled through the small window, blowing out the oil lamp. And in that suffocating darkness, only one sound remained, the faint whisper of a promise yet to be revealed, a promise that would one day make the entire camp bow its head in silence. The Tuesday morning at the Nevada training camp began with the shrill sound of a whistle and the scent of hot metal from the workout equipment. The sun had not yet risen, but the temperature had already climbed past 30 degrees. Recruits gathered around the sand field, sweat tracing down their collars. "Endurance test!" Captain Logan Pierce roared. "Anyone who quits, step out and pack your bags." The recruits shouted back in unison, "Yes, sir!" But among them, Emily Carter simply nodded. Her brown hair was tied neatly, her forehead tanned from the sun, her eyes still and steady like a calm lake. The first challenge was a sprint, followed by a continuous push, ups under the blazing sun. Ryan Keller, always eager to prove he was the best, sprinted ahead, sneering, "Look at that! Our miracle girl's running out of steam already." Emily said nothing. She inhaled deeply, clenched her fists, and kept her pace steady like a machine. By the 8th lap, heavy breathing filled the air. Some recruits began to collapse, but Emily maintained her rhythm, sweat dripping down her neck, her face unchanged. Ryan pushed himself harder, determined not to lose. But at the final turn, he stumbled, nearly falling. When he crossed the finish line, Emily was already there, calm, hands on her knees. No one laughed. Only the sound of wind filled the silence before Logan spoke slowly. "Not bad, Carter." For the first time, his voice carried no trace of mockery. That afternoon came the second challenge, the quick survival test. Each recruit was given a map, a compass, and a knife, tasked with navigating through a 3-mile training forest and returning to camp within 90 minutes. Emily went alone, quietly checking her direction by the sun. She didn't rush, only walked steadily, marking notes on her map with a pencil. Behind her, a group led by Tyler Briggs burst out laughing. "You're out of time, genius. Keep walking like that. You'll get back by midnight." They followed her, pretending to join, but really just to tease. At a fork in the trail, Tyler snatched her map, tore it in half, and tossed it to the ground. "Let's see how you get back without that." Laughter echoed through the trees. Emily looked at them and said evenly, "I hope you know the way back." Then she walked off, never looking behind her. Tyler shrugged. "Let her get lost. Less trouble for us." But 45 minutes later, when they were still wandering aimlessly, a whistle sounded in the distance. Emily had returned to camp in record time. When Tyler's group finally staggered in, covered in mud, Captain Pierce said coldly, "Those who laugh at others are usually the last to cross the finish line." Ryan stood nearby, fighting back a grin, but his eyes betrayed something new, not mockery, but a mix of irritation and curiosity. That evening, the recruits gathered in the barracks, swapping jokes. Tara sat on her bunk, brushing her hair before the mirror, saying lazily, "Carter just got lucky. Must have picked an easy path." Ryan replied, his tone lower than usual, "No." I saw her using the compass, measuring the wind. She knew exactly what she was doing. His words silenced the room. Tara forced a laugh. "What's that supposed to mean? She's some kind of map expert." Ryan shrugged, his gaze fixed on the corner where Emily sat, sewing a tear in her uniform. "I don't know. But sometimes I think she's worked somewhere. Maps decide whether you live or die." Emily heard every word. She didn't look up, only tightened her stitch. The next day, the M-4 rifle assembly and disassembly test began. Standard time, 2 minutes. Ryan dropped the safety pin, wasting nearly 1 minute and 40 seconds. Tara assembled hers out of order and was disqualified. Then it was Emily's turn. She sat down, gloves on, breathing steady. "Begin!" The clock started. Click, pin out, barrel detached. Each component lined up perfectly, precise as a blueprint. 50. 2 seconds, not a single mistake. Sergeant Cole Ramirez, the weapons instructor, stared at his stopwatch, then at her. "Carter, who taught you to do that?" Emily answered in a low, clear voice. "I taught myself, sir." Ramirez fell silent. His eyes, seasoned from training hundreds of skilled soldiers, flickered with a brief moment of suspicion, the kind reserved for those who'd been trained in the shadows. That night, under the dim light, Emily sat writing in a small notebook. Outside, Ryan leaned against the post, cigarette glowing faintly red in the wind. He watched her for a moment, then asked quietly, "You used to be in a unit, didn't you?" Emily looked up, her gaze calm but solid as steel. "A unit you don't want to meet." Ryan gave a faint smirk, but said nothing more. He knew she wasn't joking. When she turned off the light, the camp fell into silence once more. No one knew that from that moment on, Emily Carter was no longer the nameless recruit they mocked. She had begun to awaken something in them, a quiet fear they didn't yet have a name for. The Wednesday morning arrived with desert winds that burned like fire. Flags whipped violently against the steel poles, clanging in rhythm with the metallic echoes across the training field. The entire camp had been ordered to begin the hand-to-hand combat test, the most grueling challenge of the week. Today, Captain Logan Pierce bellowed, "You will learn to face your fear. No weapons, no excuses, only skill and willpower." His eyes scanned the line of recruits, then stopped at one face. "Carter, you'll fight Hale." The air seemed to freeze. Jason Hale, the same man who had knocked her down during the obstacle run, smirked. He towered over her, by nearly a head, his shoulders broad, muscles flexing beneath his black training shirt. Finally, he murmured just loud enough for the others to hear. "Try not to break your neck, Carter." Snickers rippled through the line. Tara folded her arms, her tone dripping with mockery. She should just surrender now and save herself the pain. Emily stepped into the center of the sand pit, silent. Her worn boots pressed firmly into the ground, leaving deep marks. Sunlight spilled over her shoulders, catching on the sweat and dust until she looked like a living statue, carved from steel and heat. "Begin." Jason lunged forward, fast and brutal. His first punch sliced the air beside Emily's cheek, scattering sand. She sidestepped, ducking low, her movements light and precise. Jason growled, swung again, and this time grabbed her collar, yanking hard. The fabric tore with a sharp rip. The entire training yard erupted in laughter. "Careful, she's losing her shirt." Maybe she came here for the show. But when the fabric tore open down her back, every sound stopped. On Emily's skin, between her shoulder blades, gleamed a black tattoo, a coiled serpent wrapped around a fractured skull. Under the sunlight, it seemed to move, alive. Captain Pierce froze where he stood. Up on the observation platform, Colonel Nathan Ross, overseeing the test, leaned forward, eyes wide. His lips trembled. "Impossible, Jason," still unaware, sneered, "Oh, nice tattoo." Trying to look tough? Emily lifted her head, her gaze cutting straight through him. Her voice was low, cold. "Let go." "And if I don't?" he challenged. She moved, fast, controlled. A perfect shoulder turn, wrist locked on his joint. Jason lost balance and crashed into the sand. Captain Pierce took a step forward, but Colonel Ross raised his hand. "Stand down." Emily straightened, breathing steady, the tattoo still burning beneath the light. Ross descended from the platform, each step deliberate, solemn, as if walking into a memorial. He stopped before her, his eyes filled with disbelief and reverence. "Carter," he rasped, "who gave you that insignia?" She met his gaze, her voice quiet, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "No one gave it, sir. It was earned." Ross paused. "By whom?" "By Ghost Viper." A dry gust swept across the yard, stirring a haze of dust. The recruits glanced at one another, confused. That name, Ghost Viper, had vanished from every military record nearly a decade ago. A covert unit, erased from history, its members regarded as shadows that never returned. Colonel Ross straightened, raising his hand in salute. "Welcome back, Agent Carter." The entire camp fell silent. Jason stumbled backward, his face drained of color, mouth opening without sound. Tara's water bottle slipped from her hand, the plastic hitting the ground with a sharp, hollow crack. Even Captain Pierce, usually stoic, gave a slow nod, his eyes stripped of disdain, replaced with respect. Emily pulled her torn shirt together and said softly, "I'm not an agent anymore, sir. Just someone learning how to start from zero again." Ross shook his head gently. "Anyone who's carried that symbol never truly starts from zero." He turned to the rest of the recruits. "From this moment, anyone who mocks Carter mocks this entire army. No one spoke, no laughter, no whisper. As Emily walked off the field, the sun hung high, its golden light glinting on the sweat tracing her neck. She hadn't won through strength. She'd won through truth. And in that moment, the entire camp understood. The woman they once scorned wasn't just a recruit. She was a living legend that had stepped out from the shadows. That afternoon, the entire camp seemed to fall into a strange silence. No more mocking laughter, no idle chatter in the mess hall. The whole training ground carried a heavy quiet, as if everyone was still trying to process the same truth. Emily Carter was no ordinary recruit. Ryan Keller was the first to break that silence. Sitting in the corner, he tapped his spoon lightly against his tray and spoke in a low voice. "I mean it yesterday when she fell. I thought she just got lucky. But the way she stood up and that look in her eyes, I've never seen anyone like that." No one answered. A few just nodded faintly. Across the table, Tara sat with her hair falling over half her face, silent. Her manicured nails scraped lightly against the table, leaving faint marks. Another recruit whispered, "Did you see Colonel Ross salute her?" "Actually salute." Someone else replied quietly, "Never seen that before, except with generals." The air in the mess hall was thick. Those who once laughed now kept their eyes down, staring at their plates, avoiding the calm, unreadable gaze of Emily, who sat alone in the corner as if nothing had happened. Later that afternoon, during a short instructors' meeting, Captain Logan Pierce began in a solemn tone. Carter once served in the Ghost Viper unit, confirmed through classified files. Don't ask for details. She's here under a special directive from command. One young officer hesitated. "But sir, why would she return as a recruit?" Logan looked toward the window, where sunlight drew a golden streak across the floor. "Some people," he said slowly, "don't come back for rank. They come back to remember why they fight." Outside, on the practice field, Emily was showing a small group how to properly counter and disarm an opponent. She didn't shout or bark orders. She demonstrated once, clean, sharp, precise, so flawless that everyone watching held their breath. Ryan stepped forward, hesitant. "Carter, I want to learn that chokehold you used on Hale." "That move. I've never seen it before." Emily turned to him, her expression no longer distant. "It's not a move," she said softly. "It's instinct. When someone grabs your collar, you don't react. You wait. When they use force, you use direction." She took Ryan's wrist and turned it slightly. In an instant, he was locked, unable to move, not in pain, but completely restrained. "See?" she said calmly. "It's not about being stronger. It's about understanding more." Ryan exhaled and nodded, a look of respect shining in his eyes, something he had never felt before. That night, Tara sat on her bunk, listening to the steady footsteps in the hallway. She knew it was Emily, the one who always rose first and slept last. Tara looked down at her own hands, nails perfectly polished, then at Emily's calloused ones as she walked past. "Why aren't you angry?" Tara blurted. Emily stopped. "Because anger doesn't change anything," she said quietly. "It only makes you forget what you're fighting for." Tara lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. I was wrong." Emily smiled faintly. "No, you just hadn't looked long enough." Then she walked away, leaving Tara sitting still, tears falling silently onto her hands. The next morning, when Captain Pierce arrived at the field, the recruits were already lined up in perfect formation, and this time no one dared to laugh when Emily stepped forward. He scanned the line and called out, his voice firm, "Carter, step up. Today you'll lead the warm up." A small ripple of surprise spread through the ranks. Emily nodded, stepped to the front, and motioned for the group to follow. "No new drills," she said. "Only one rule. Never quit. even when no one believes in you. Then she started to run. Hundreds of footsteps followed in rhythm, pounding through the sand. Dust rose, sunlight flared, and the air filled with the sound of breath, effort, and unity. Captain Pierce stood at a distance, arms folded, saying nothing, only smiling faintly. Colonel Ross, passing by the fence, paused and whispered to his aide beside him, "You can teach skill. You can enforce discipline. But one thing can never be taught: courage." When the session ended and the sun hung high overhead, Emily turned to face the recruits. The same faces that had once mocked her. Now they stood straight, silent, and respectful. A faint smile touched her lips, not because she had won, but because at last they were finally seeing her, the way people see someone they've learned to respect. The desert wind that day blew hard, whipping sand across their faces like needles. On the firing range, a long line of recruits lay flat on the ground, rifles aimed toward distant white targets no bigger than a fingernail. The whistle blew sharply. Long-range shooting test. 5 rounds, 400 meters, one chance only. Anyone scoring below 3, pack up and leave. Captain Logan Pierce's voice cut through the heat, cold and sharp as a blade. The recruits murmured nervously, faces tense. Ryan Keller took a deep breath, wiping sweat from his brow. Tara Monroe stood beside him, gripping her M4 tightly, trying to appear calm, though the muzzle trembled slightly. At the end of the line, Emily Carter knelt down and slowly adjusted her rifle stand. The wind tugged at her hair, but her gaze didn't waver. "Carter," Pierce barked. "Did you hear the order? Get into position." "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice even and composed. The signal to fire blared. The first bursts of gunfire cracked through the air, the smell of gunpowder thickening around them. Tara fired in quick succession, but her shots veered left. She gritted her teeth, trying to correct her aim, but her hands continued to shake. At the end of the line, Emily still hadn't fired a single round. She aimed, then lowered her rifle again. Ryan glanced over, frowning. What's she waiting for? The wind shifted. A small swirl of sand spun across the range, blurring the targets. Emily narrowed her eyes, adjusting her sight slightly, not with any wind gauge, but by instinct. 3 minutes remaining, shouted the supervising officer. A sharp crack broke the air. Emily's first bullet cut through the wind and struck the bullseye dead center. Murmurs rose around her, but she didn't stop. Second shot, hit. Third, hit. Fourth, hit. Fifth, straight through the same hole as before. The entire firing range fell silent. The officer, holding the stopwatch, stared down at his timer, his voice rasping, "Carter, 5 shots, 5 bullseyes. 37 seconds. Captain Pierce stepped forward, inspecting her rifle. He frowned. "You adjusted the sight in the wrong direction. Your rounds should have drifted off by at least 2 centimeters. Emily wiped her hands, her tone calm. "I know, sir. The southwest wind was off by 12 degrees. I compensated by reflex." Pierce studied her quietly. For the first time, his eyes showed acknowledgement. "Compensated by reflex," he repeated under his breath, then turned to the recruits. "Remember that. That's not luck. That's discipline, built from experience." Tara kept her head down, her rifle trembling slightly in her grip. She had missed 2 shots, barely scoring 3 points. As Ryan passed by, he stopped beside her. "Don't let it get to you," he said. "Everyone here knows she's different." Tara gave a bitter laugh. "Different? What is she, Ryan? A person or a machine?" Ryan answered softly. "A person, but the kind you might only meet once in a lifetime." In the distance, Emily disassembled her rifle, cleaning each part meticulously. Her face was unreadable, but when she caught Captain Pierce's subtle nod from across the range, the corner of her lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more like a quiet sign of understanding. That afternoon, Colonel Nathan Ross appeared at the range, arms crossed, as he studied the digital results. He spoke quietly to Logan. "I've seen that kind of aim before. 6 years ago, during an operation in Syria, someone fired in the dark, no scope, no wind meter. Her name was also Carter." Logan didn't answer. He knew what Ross was implying. "You think she's the same one?" Ross looked out across the field, his voice low. "If she is, then she's not just a soldier. She's a weapon forged from silence." That night, after lights out, Ryan walked into the mess hall and found Emily sitting alone beside her rifle, polished to a silver sheen. He sat across from her, quiet for a moment before speaking. "Today, you made the whole camp hold its breath." Emily looked at him, her expression calm. They don't need to hold their breath. They just need to learn how to breathe and aim right. Ryan chuckled softly. "You're strange, Carter." "Not strange," she said quietly. "Just someone who's been in a place where one mistake meant someone didn't come back." Moonlight streamed through the window, glinting off the metal of her rifle, shining like an old promise. Ryan looked at her for a long moment before saying gently, "You don't look like someone running from the past. You look like someone trying to forgive herself." Emily didn't answer. She just stared into the night, where the desert stretched endlessly, the wind still blowing. And in that moment, Ryan understood. Behind her calm was a storm she was still learning to live with. That morning, the sun had barely risen above the horizon when the alarm blared across the base. All recruits were urgently summoned to the main field. The desert wind whipped sand into the air, thick and tense like the calm before a storm. Captain Logan Pierce stood at the center, his expression stern. Today, the entire unit will enter a tactical simulation. One team defends, one attacks. Anyone who breaks formation or causes the team to fail will be dismissed from camp. No exceptions. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Tara glanced at Emily, lips pressed tight. Ryan looked down, caught between regret and nerves. "Carter," Pierce called, his voice cutting through the noise. "You'll lead the assault team." Silence fell instantly. "Her?" one recruit blurted out. Pierce's voice hardened. "Is there a problem?" No one dared to speak again. A map was spread across the table. Emily leaned over it, pencil in hand, her voice steady and composed. "The enemy is fortified in the abandoned building. We have 20 minutes to breach. 3 divisions, front assault, support, and flanking." Ryan asked, "Are we using simulated weapons?" "No," she replied. "Real conditions, paint rounds, but real tactics." Tara let out a dry laugh. "You really think you're in command, don't you?" Emily didn't look up. "No, I just don't want us to fail." There was nothing sharp in her tone, but something about her voice silenced everyone. The exercise began. Emily's team advanced toward the ruined structure. She moved first, eyes scanning each corner. No shouting, only hand signals. Her movements, swift, precise, deliberate, reminded Ryan of how real special operatives moved. Tara, assigned to cover fire, bristled at taking orders from the woman she once mocked. When Emily signaled hold, Tara ignored it and charged forward, firing wildly. A sharp alarm blared. Red lights flashed. The team had been compromised. Disqualified. The referee's voice boomed through the loudspeaker. The air erupted with frustration. Ryan slammed his helmet to the ground. "What the hell was that, Tara?" Tara shouted back. "I don't need anyone telling me what to do." Her eyes flared. "She's just some ghost agent, not my superior." Emily approached, not angry, not loud. She said only one line. You're right, I'm not your superior. That's why I understand how foolish it is not to listen. The words hit like a quiet thunderclap. Tara froze, unable to respond. Pierce, watching from a distance, saw everything. He didn't intervene, only noted something down in his book. That evening, after training hours, Emily was summoned to the command tent. Captain Pierce sat at his desk, her classified file spread open before him. He turned a few pages, then stopped at an old photo, a young woman in combat gear standing beside a man in a black jacket. "Who's this?" he asked. Emily looked at the photo. Her voice hushed. "My mentor. He used to call me the last candidate." "Ghost Viper?" She nodded. "He taught me that in battle, the first to speak is often the first to fall." Pierce closed the file gently. "I don't care who you used to be," he said. "But today, you reminded me of something important." He stood, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Leadership isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who others choose to follow." That night, the camp was quiet. Silver moonlight washed over the tents. Ryan sat outside and noticed Emily on the steps, cleaning her rifle under the dim glow. He approached. "You know," he said softly, "today, when you spoke to Tara, I finally understood why people listen to you." Emily didn't look up. "Because I yell louder?" Ryan shook his head. "Because you don't have to." A gust of wind swept through, carrying sand over their hands and hair. "Tomorrow," Emily said quietly, "I'll let Tara take command. She needs a chance to learn the lesson her own way." Ryan stared at her. "After she ruined the mission today?" "Exactly," Emily replied, setting the rifle down. "If no one gives her a chance, she'll never change." Ryan said nothing. In that moment, he realized there was a kind of strength that didn't come from victory, but from forgiveness. The next morning, Tara was named team leader for the new tactical drill. She was shocked, nervous, and uncertain. When she turned to look at Emily, Emily simply nodded. "Trust the map, not yourself." The exercise ended quietly. Tara led her team to success. When they returned, she walked up to Emily, eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me when I didn't deserve it." Emily smiled faintly. Everyone is undeserving until they try again. That day, for the first time in the camp's history, the recruits applauded after a test. And in the middle of the crowd, Emily Carter stood still, not proud, not triumphant, just quietly gazing at the bright desert sky as the wind carried the sound of applause far across the sands. That afternoon, the sun poured over the barracks like molten glass. The air after training was silent, broken only by the hiss of wind against the metal fence and the crunch of boots on sand. Everyone was exhausted, yet their minds still stirred with the echoes of the tactical exercise Emily had led. Captain Logan Pierce was about to leave his office when the phone on his desk rang. He picked it up and heard the duty officer's voice. "Sir, there's someone here from Central Command. He says he's here to see Carter." Pierce frowned. "See who?" "Carter. Emily Carter, sir. And he's not in uniform." Suspicion flickered in Pierce's eyes. "Bring him through the main gate. I'll be there immediately." At the gate, a tall man in his mid-40s stood quietly under the blazing sun, wearing a black jacket and jeans. His posture was upright, his face calm, but his eyes sharp as blades. Beside him, 2 guards stood tense. Pierce approached. "Who are you? This is a restricted area, if you don't." The man raised an ID card, the golden emblem of an eagle glinting under the light, engraved with the words U.S. Joint Command. His voice was deep and firm. "My name is Thomas Reed. I'm here for one of my own." Pierce froze. He had heard that name before, in classified reports reserved for top-ranking officers. A man who once led covert operations in the Middle East. A man who had been off the active list for 3 years. "Where is Carter?" Reed asked. Pierce replied, "She's in the training field, sir. May I ask what this is about?" Thomas looked toward the fluttering flags in the distance. "Nothing urgent. I'm just here to take her home." When Emily stepped out from the training ground, the wind shifted. Dust shimmered in the amber light, sweeping across her sun-browned face. She saw a familiar figure standing beside a black pickup truck, a figure she thought she would never see again. "You didn't have to come here," she said softly. Thomas Reed turned, a faint smile touching his otherwise stoic face. "I know, but I came anyway." The training yard fell utterly silent. Ryan, who had been cleaning his rifle, stopped mid-Egean motion. Tara and the others exchanged startled glances. Colonel Nathan Ross had just stepped out of the command building, and upon seeing the man, he immediately straightened and saluted. "Sir, welcome, General Reed." The title cracked through the air like thunder. "General? Reed?" Tara dropped her water bottle, the hollow sound echoing through the stunned silence. Ryan looked at Emily, his voice barely a whisper. You know him." Thomas placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, his voice steady. "Not just know her. She's my wife." Shock rippled through the ranks. The wind swept across the field, scattering training papers into the air. Pierce stepped forward, trying to keep his composure. "Sir, if I understand correctly, then Carter—" "Is Emily Reed?" Thomas interrupted, his gaze still fixed on her. "Carter was her maiden name. We were married before she left the Ghost Viper unit." Colonel Ross nodded slowly, understanding everything at last. The special authorization, the sealed file, the unspoken history. "Sir, I had no idea." Reed gave a faint smile. "No one needed to know. She didn't want privilege, only the chance to serve like everyone else." Emily stood beside him, silent. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of something unspoken. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured. "They were just starting to believe in me." Thomas replied, "And they should know why." He turned to face the gathered soldiers. "You mocked her, doubted her, underestimated her. But the woman standing before you once saved 2 entire squads during a black operation in Kabul. She's the only person to ever pass the Ghost Viper trial without retraining." No one moved. No one breathed. Ryan bowed his head, while Tara's hands trembled as she clenched them tight. Thomas Reed turned back to Emily, a soft smile on his lips. "I came only to remind you, you don't have to hide from your past. It's what made you strong." She met his gaze, her voice gentler now. "And you," she said, "are still as stubborn as the first day we met." "And you," Thomas replied, brushing a hand against her cheek, "are still the only person who made me believe in honor." Together they walked toward the black truck. The wind rose again, veiling them in a swirl of desert dust. The entire camp stood motionless, no one daring to speak. Only Colonel Ross exhaled softly, a rare smile breaking across his face. "What a small world," he said quietly. "A legend hiding right in our own ranks." Ryan watched the truck disappear into the horizon and murmured to Tara, "She's not just a legend. She's a reminder that sometimes the person we look down on is the very one who once fought for us to live." 3 days after the black truck carrying General Thomas Reed and Emily Carter left the base, the air around the camp still hadn't returned to normal. Every time her name was mentioned, the recruits lowered their voices, as if speaking about a legend. Ryan Keller continued his morning drills at the shooting range, repeating the aiming technique Emily had once shown him. Tara Monroe requested to stay an extra month to rebuild discipline. No one said it aloud, but they all knew. Emily had left behind something no training manual could ever teach. That evening, inside the command building, Colonel Nathan Ross entered the briefing room where Captain Logan Pierce was already waiting, a cup of cold coffee in hand and a tense look on his face. "Did General Reed just send a message?" Logan asked. Ross nodded. "He wants an urgent meeting. It's about Carter." The door closed behind them, and the room grew heavy with silence. Ross opened a sealed file, laying the top page on the table. In bold letters it read, "Classified Ghost Viper Evaluation." His voice lowered. "This is the Ghost Viper Assessment Report on Emily Carter, filed before she disappeared from the active roster." Read it. Logan picked it up, his eyes scanning the sharp, handwritten notes. Subject Carter ID code V413, Longxi, range accuracy, Sniper Alpha, tactical reflexes, grade A+, psychological stability, maintained under all conditions. Special note, innate leadership ability, but refuses command. Reason given, I only fight when I must, not when I'm allowed. Logan exhaled slowly. She really was Ghost Viper. Ross nodded, and now she's returned, not as an agent, but as a symbol. The door opened again. A young soldier entered and handed Ross a red, sealed envelope. "Latest update from Central Command, sir, concerning Carter." Ross tore it open, read quickly, and froze for a moment. "General Thomas Reed has proposed a new special tactical program, codename Shadowline. Founder, Emily Carter." Logan looked up, a mix of surprise and admiration in his voice. "She's coming back?" Ross replied quietly. "Not here. But somewhere else. She's training those who have the courage to face fear and not run." Meanwhile, 50 miles from the camp, in the heart of the desert, a temporary base had been built. Inside, Emily stood before a group of new soldiers. No insignias, no ranks, just men and women who had failed once and were now trying to find themselves again. She stepped forward, her voice low and steady. "Here, there are no ranks, no medals, only two kinds of people, those who learn from their mistakes and those who are buried by them." She pointed toward the distant targets. "You will not learn how to shoot. You will learn how to see. Because in battle, what matters is not the weapon, but the person holding it." A young soldier raised his hand. "Ma'am, why is this program called Shadowline?" Emily smiled faintly. "Because the line between light and shadow isn't out there. It's inside every one of us." Back at the old camp, Ryan was called to the command office. Colonel Ross looked at him and placed an envelope on the table. "Carter sent this for you." Ryan opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper, written in her familiar handwriting. "Don't look for me. Look for yourself. One day when the wind changes, we'll meet again. Not on the training field, but in the battle that belongs to us. E." Ryan clenched the note in his hand, lifting his gaze toward the window. Outside, the desert wind still blew, shimmering with the same golden light as the day she left. During the final evaluation ceremony, Colonel Ross read the list of commendations. When he reached the name Emily Carter, the entire camp fell silent. "She isn't here," he said slowly. "But if there's one lesson she left us, it's this. Strength doesn't come from power. It comes from the ability to make others stronger." Hundreds of recruits bowed their heads. Among them, Tara gently squeezed Ryan's hand and whispered, "She doesn't need to be here anymore. She's made all of us part of her story." Ross nodded quietly. And that is the true legacy of a warrior. That night, across the Nevada sky, dry winds carried fine sand that shimmered like countless stars. Somewhere far away, Emily Carter walked through the dark backpack on her shoulders, eyes fixed on the horizon. She needed no badge, no glory, Only one unfinished promise: to keep teaching the world that true strength sometimes comes from silence. Night fell over the Nevada desert like a dark velvet curtain scattered with stars. In the distance, the faint glow of the Shadowline training camp flickered in the wind, small flames defying the vast darkness. Emily Carter sat alone at a wooden field desk, her old notebook open before her. On its worn pages, smudged by dust and sweat, a line still stood out: "Never let the darkness decide who you are." She closed her eyes as memories returned, the screams of comrades, gunfire tearing through the night, faces of those who never came back. She had once believed she'd buried it all when she left Ghost Viper. But the more she taught, the more she realized pain never disappears. It becomes a reminder. Outside, under the dim yellow lights, the recruits trained. Ryan Keller's voice rang clear and firm. "Don't look at the target. Feel the wind. Find the silence between heartbeats." From afar, Emily smiled faintly. The man who once mocked her was now a leader, his calm authority echoing her own. Tara was nearby, teaching first aid, her hands steady, her arrogance gone. When a recruit fumbled, Tara simply said, "It's all right. Try again. Mistakes are only dangerous when you're afraid to fix them." It was Emily's lesson, now passed on. The next morning, Colonel Nathan Ross arrived with several officers. He walked across the sand, thoughtful. "You're not here for inspection, are you?" Emily asked. "No," Ross replied. "I came to thank you." He watched the recruits, once broken, now standing proud. "You've reminded them what the Army forgets sometimes: to believe in their worth, not just orders." Emily looked toward the horizon. "I don't teach them to fight. I teach them to stand up again." Ross nodded, then handed her a black envelope sealed in gold, the mark of Ghost Viper. An old comrade sent this. He said, "Legends don't end. They continue." Inside was an old silver tag engraved with the words, "The Quiet Strike." Emily closed her eyes, hearing her mentor's voice. "When the world grows too loud to hear truth, be silent. Let your actions speak." That night, before leaving the base, she walked along the training field, wind tossing her hair, sand swirling around her boots. She stopped before a sign the recruits had carved. Not the scream, but the heart that stays silent within the storm. She smiled. No medal could make her prouder. She climbed into her old pickup truck. Thomas Reed sat waiting, the moonlight tracing his face. "Leaving again?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "There are still people who don't know how to believe in themselves." He handed her a red, sealed envelope. "Command wants you to train the International Response Unit." She smiled faintly. "You know I won't. They need people who make noise. I work best unseen." Thomas covered her hand gently. "I don't need the world to see you. I just need you not to disappear." "I'm not disappearing," she said. "I'm just walking a path few have the courage to take." As the truck drove off, the camp lights faded behind them. Through the mirror, she saw Ryan, Tara, and the others standing at attention, saluting. She didn't turn back. True goodbyes, she knew, never needed words. The desert wind rose under the moon, erasing their tire tracks, as if the journey had never begun. But in the hearts of those she left behind, the name Emily Carter remained like a quiet flame, steady, guiding, eternal. "One day," she had once said, "someone will ask me what's stronger than a weapon." Her answer would never change. Silence, when it comes from courage. That was Emily Carter's final promise, and the legacy she left to the world. From the perspective of an expert in leadership psychology and inner strength, Emily Carter's story is not merely the journey of a soldier, but a test of human limits in the face of pain, responsibility, and silence. In a world where noise is mistaken for power, she chose silence not out of weakness, but because she understood that stillness is the language of the strong. Emily did not win through violence or fame, but through her ability to help others rise. And that is the truest form of power. Her story reminds us that it is not the loudest voice that is right, but the one calm enough to listen, understand, and act. And perhaps, within each of us, there exists a small part of Emily Carter, someone still learning to stay centered amidst chaos, to rediscover courage within silence itself. If this story made you believe that true strength is not found in shouting, but in the heart that dares to stay silent in the storm, then hit like to share this message with others. Subscribe to follow more journeys of ordinary people who continue to teach the world about resilience and faith. And finally, leave a comment below as your personal pledge today. Write inner strength. Because sometimes those two words alone are enough to remind us that true power does not lie in authority, but in silence when it comes from courage.